now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Fernando Rivera. He's the director of the Puerto Rico Research Hub here at UCF. And Kristen Delgado, our favorite news anchor from WFTV. I'll hand it over to you all. Thank you so much for being here today. To all of you, we are going to take some questions at the end of the program, and we'll also have time for more cafecito and more empanadas. I'm shocked that we still have some, but we have some quesitos and everything, so please hang out afterwards. And thank you again.
¿Cómo empezamos?
Ay, Dios mío. Bueno, más reciente, I guess, right? So, for those of you who don't know, I just came back to Puerto Rico in July. And at the time, I asked people, I spoke to Rivera, I spoke to Luna, I spoke to the governor. And at the time, what I was told was, no, the grid is not ready to handle Category 4, but if another Category 4 were to come, the resources would be immediately available to respond in a much different way than the response to Hurricane Maria. Obviously, after Maria, it was weeks before the island truly got what it needed. In the time, people didn't have electricity, people were dying, and at times they were dying of dehydration, right? And then we find pallets of water in warehouses months later, right? So the conversation now is supposed to be different. The conversation now is supposed to be the communities have the resources they have, and they're being distributed properly so that people have water, so that people have generators, so people have the necessary help, so that people don't die waiting for help. And at this point, we can only hope that that's true, right?
No, absolutely, and so to give you the plug in, so you did an excellent special shuttle program on Hurricane Maria that people can find that when you talk about these issues. I think it's, here we are 5 years after Hurricane Maria, and it seems that we're talking still about the same thing. And, you get into the frustration that you hear from people in Puerto Rico, right? In terms of, this shouldn't be the way that we prepare for this, right? It shouldn't be the way that we have to go through this. And, obviously when, I approached you and we were having discussions with the team about, what do we do 5 years after Hurricane Maria that is a little bit different, just to have a conversation. I never expected that we would be talking about, Hurricane Fiona.
Right.
In terms of bringing up the same issues, right?
Well, to think that, obviously today is the 5-year mark, so people in Puerto Rico right now are in the dark 5 years to the day that Hurricane Maria hit. Right?
Yeah, that's a somber reminder, right? Have things improved, not improved? I'm in the business that everything that I do, I wish I was out of the job, because I'm talking about, looking at inequality, looking at all those type of things. I wish, I didn't have a job.
Right. That those issues didn't exist.
So I could concentrate on something completely different, but that is not the case. And unfortunately now it's the test, right?
That's
now.
Exactly what this is. That is a test. This is a test, and we hope that the government passes, that NEMA passes, that NUMA passes, that PREPA passes, right? We hope that I sat down and I spoke to the executive director for PREPA, and I said, how long is it going to take before the grid is actually done? And he said, 8 years from now. I spoke to Luma and I said, what happens if a hurricane comes tomorrow? And he said, we have more inventory, we have hundreds of millions of dollars of warehouses full of inventory, so when a light pole goes down, you can replace it much faster than before. Let's hope that's true. I talked to the governor, who said he's watching over both parties involved with the electrical grid, because he, right now, is not in support of Luma. He says he's not canceling their contract, but that he has them on probation, that they don't have his full support right now. When Sunday afternoon came and the power came out, the conversation was, it'll be a few days. Now it's going to be a few weeks before the power is fully restored. As of this morning, I think they tweeted at 1 a.m. they had 260,000 clients restored with power. When you compare that to the number of people still without power, is still a drop in the bucket, right? Is it progress? Sure. But time will tell if I spoke to FEMA coordinator for Puerto Rico who got his job on the island after Maria. His job is specifically coordination for Puerto Rico after Maria, because we know it was such a disaster last time. So I said, how do you avoid the same issues you had last time? Last time you didn't have enough FEMA personnel that spoke Spanish. Now he said, I have a team of 800 people in my office, 95%, 98% of which speak Spanish. Let's hope that they are getting to the people right now and getting them the needs that are necessary. He said, we have 6 to 7 times more the supply on the island of resources than we had before Maria. Before Hurricane Maria, we had 1 warehouse full of supplies, now we have 4 FEMA warehouses of supplies. So we can only hope that the measures that were taken are enough. And you're talking about a Category 1 storm, right? So the winds are different, but the reality is when it comes down to the accumulation of water, it was just as much, if not, it was close or just as much as Maria. So you're still talking about immense flooding. You're still talking about, we all saw that famous video with the bridge that was built after Maria that got washed away. I went to the interior of the island, an area called Maricao. It's 2.5 hours from San Juan. To give you perspective, it's a 2-hour drive, a little more than 2 hour drive. 1 hour of that drive was spent going up a mountain. You're talking lush vegetation, you're talking cables, for power, mountainous area, very hilly, and the roads are narrow, right? So you go, how would they even, you would need a military type of vehicle to get through all the brush and debris that's going to be on those roads with all the vegetation that's in that area, because you're talking about an area that's known for its coffee beans and the farms for growing that. So all that lush vegetation, power lines, debris all over the place, you would need a military vehicle to get up there. It takes anyone an hour to get in a mountain just to get to Maricao, and then you go, this is so remote and so desolate, how does one get here after an emergency? It seems impossible. So now I spoke to yesterday I was checking on all the people that I had interviewed, and one of them was the Director of Public Works in Maricao, and I said, how are you guys doing? He said, right now, obviously no one had power at that point, they still don't have power. And he said now, as of yesterday, 75% of the population of Maricao didn't have water either, because when the power goes out, the aqueduct pumps go out, and now they don't have drinking water, right? So you have to hope that the 5,000-ish residents of Maricao have water bottles that they prepared, and that there's resources close enough to them to get them water, because the closest area to them is 45 minutes away, it's Mayones, right? So now it's like, or that, or Ponce. So now, and we also have the state of Ponce right now, it's the river, right? So it's just one of those things where it's like, this is just, Maria was the straw that broke the camel's back more than the electrical bit, right? And that's nowhere near repaired by the time Fiona came. And now it's like, how do you repair from Fiona? How much damage is going to be done that's set back from the Maria recovery? Maria's damage was $90 billion. It just seems like this is one thing after another, even though it was 5 years apart, because such little progress had been made in that time. And even then, the conversations about hurricanes post-Maria aren't, we can handle it, everything's going to be fine, it's we're going to recover faster. So we can only hope that that's true now.
Yeah, now, and one of the things in preparing, so a lot of people are saying, hey, can you tell about how the reconstruction is going? And yes, some things are a little bit better. I think still, in terms of transparency and access to data, and capacity, for research-wise, it makes it really difficult sometimes in terms of doing that. And again, to be fair, nobody expected that we were going to have a financial crisis that put Puerto Rico in bankruptcy, that established a financial fiscal board to pay off the debt, to have the economic decisions made for the people of Puerto Rico, to having a major hurricane, to having earthquakes, to having a pandemic, to having another hurricane, and in the middle of it, also governmental turmoil. The first time in the history of the country where a governor was removed by the people.
Right.
So this is obviously a collection of circumstances that make it a real challenge to really understand what's going on. But it's also a precautionary tale of what would happen. And I think right now, in terms of the research that I'm doing and sort of what I'm hearing from people on the ground is, and it's something that's happening here as well, when we start losing faith in our institutions, nobody benefits from that. And I think this panacea that just because we bring in a private company, everything's going to be better, it's not necessarily the case if you don't have the system of accountability put in place that we can, be accountable to these companies that come in. And I showed you a story. You were talking about Marical and sort of like the mountains and all those stuff of things. So I remember I went with a group of people from UCF to Puerto Rico in February of 2018. So about 5 months after Hurricane Maria. And you could tell, the debris was still there. 5 months into it, it looked like the hurricane had happened the day before. So we were at the gas station close to the regional airport in the Maya West airport out there. And I see this dude, right? Just not to be offensive to anybody. But I see this American dude, right? In the middle of the gas station with a bag full of soda. And he kind of like approached us and said like, hey, can you give me a ride to the airport? It's right there. He was sweating and all sorts of things. Sure, I'll bet. So we got into the conversation, right? And he was there. He was from a company of electrical workers that came from North Carolina. Great. I said like, are you ended up here? No, they were looking for people. We came down to Puerto Rico here. But then he was met with a reality, right? So what had happened was that the subcontractor had gone to North Carolina, hired people because you need to go to the mountainous area. And they said, where are the mountains nearby? North Carolina has mountains, right? But I don't know if you've ever been to a road in the mountains of Puerto Rico and compare it to a road to the mountains of North Carolina, right? So this worker was like, okay, so we got shortchanged. So there were about 40 workers that just decided we're out. We got shortchanged, we're taking the flight, we're out of here. And then we got stuck trying to talk about the conditions, right? So like, it's crazy to bring a utility truck up those mountains out there without the expert local knowledge out here that we have, right? And that tells you a little bit about the issues out here that, when people start mistrusting not only the governmental institutions, but whoever comes out there to help.
Right.
It doesn't help for the reconstruction or the recovery of Puerto Rico, because at the same time, we cannot be governing by, removing people all the time, right? And for all the criticisms of Luma Energy and what's happening with PREPA, what are the alternatives? And I think this is where, kind of like the sociological view of everything, right? This is a contract that was put in place, right? I'm pretty sure that a company's not going to put a contract that says like, hey, if I don't perform well, I have to pay you for my lack of performance out here.
To that, and I spoke to the RDC a couple weeks ago now, and so I asked him, you gave up your support for Luma, where does things stand now? He's very firm in saying that he does not support them right now, that they're on probation with him, and that they're going to be watched closely. But he said something else that was interesting. He goes, but this isn't a matter of canceling the contract. It's not that easy, because under law in Puerto Rico, our energy law says that we would have to go through another procurement process to get another private company to come in. And I thought, oh, so this is just law now. This isn't a matter of, we would go back to, PREPA, not that PREPA's prepared to do so because they lost 4,000 employees when the transition happened, right? But this isn't a matter of going back to what it was. The future is, under the current laws, that another private company would have to come in and work with PREPA to transmit and distribute power. This is just a law of the land now. So I thought, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and you know, when you start understanding those policies, right? And, you know, unfortunately what's happening, you know, there's kind of like some policies out there, but policies sometimes have unintended consequences. And sometimes perceptions are stronger than actual pen and paper type of things. And, you know, that's what worries me a lot about Puerto Rico, and I certainly understand where people, you know, that had to go through what they had to go through during Hurricane Maria, are a little bit suspicious of the promises that have been made. And not only by governmental officials at the local level, but Puerto Rico also at the federal level. You know, that is something that, you know, on this side of the pond, we can actually control as well. One of the things that now I see some of my students in the crowd, in terms of, you know, going back down memory lane, and some of the things that have changed in the past 5 years, especially here at UCF and our community, right? That, you know, unfortunately, things like all those type of things
Right.
To come through. But I think, you know, one of the things that I would, you know, not only me, but our faculty members here at UCF were sort of understanding that there was a growing Hispanic community in Central Florida. And it was just a matter of time that that was going to be reflected on campus as well. You know, and I don't know if you know, but we're now a Hispanic serving institution, meaning that right now 28% of our student body is part of Latinx group, and they meet some federal requirements out here. But that's a significant number out here in terms of that. But I sort of remember that because if you don't know, also kind of plug here for the Puerto Rico research, we didn't have that in 2007. And we started in the summer of 2018. Because sort of the stars online is somehow that, you know, sort of this research demographic trend all of a sudden became a reality for a lot of administrators that saw people knocking on their offices here at UCF. Right, they saw sort of firsthand that devastation.
Right.
And I always say that Hurricane Maria served as kind of like this reintroduction to the growing Puerto Rican population in Central Florida. I think that's where a lot of people realize, wait. So my neighbor is from Puerto Rico. Countries from Puerto Rico. You know, my son's daughter's teacher is from Puerto Rico. You know, these reporters are, they're from Puerto Rico as well, right? So that was that realization in terms of some of the things that were going on in terms of that. But I think, you know, and I think this is one of the big challenges also in terms of you know, how do we build that bridge between Puerto Rico and Florida, right? And that's usually, and we've seen it like right now.
Well, what's interesting is that, at least on the Puerto Rico end of things, I wouldn't imagine that they want to necessarily build that bridge, right? Because they're losing people as it is, right? I think the census, was it 440,000 or so Puerto Ricans left the island in the last decade. So, you know, when I talked to the governor, and then when I talked to the president of RUMA, he did the same thing. He says, we're hiring, come on down. You know, he said that the proudest thing that we have here, you know, about RUMA is the greatest thing is that we're 3,000 Puerto Ricans, right? Come on down, we're hiring. The same thing was said by Erlisi when I interviewed him. He said, you know, there are jobs, come down and work here. But then you look at the, you know, the minimum wage, and it's not even $8.50 until next year, right? And then there's also the same things that are happening here, happening everywhere. Puerto Rico's not an exclusion to that. When I talk to people, I spoke to a woman who manages a restaurant in Santurce, and she said, you know, we have like these like ghost employees, you know, they come, they interview, I never hear from them. They come, or they say they're on the way, they make an appointment, they don't show up. But I guess to the government, it looks like they are attempting to get a job. So there's staffing shortages. When we went to Puerto Rico back in July, we stopped just to get breakfast because we had landed early in the morning, I had eaten before we get going on our day. And she goes, I can't sit you inside, I don't have any staff, it's just me. So she's feeding people, taking orders through a window and feeding people, and they're just gonna take it to go or eat outside in the little area we have here, because you don't have to go out the net adentro, right? So that same woman, we spoke to, we did an interview with her, and I just checked on her after the storm, and she says she had to, again, this is the same scenario she was in after Hurricane Maria, power's out, so she had to go back to her business, and her boss allows her to use the generator at the business to power her cell phone, to, you know, hopefully there's running water there, even though there isn't running water at her home. She told me 2 days after Maria, they were able to open, thankfully, because the day before Maria, they actually got a generator installed. So they were in a unique position to help out the community, and she said we worked and worked and worked, and people would come and say they hadn't eaten in 3 days, and we would give them food, and we all just depended on one another, because we realized at that point the government was not going to help us, and so it was on each other to help one another. And the same thing she feels is happening again. She just sent me a message and said, listen, there's people in need of food and water, and there's plenty of like little cocineros and people who are giving away hot food and all that. They also need donations too, but as far as I know, you know, where's the bottle of water, where's the generators or the bottle of water? As far as she's experienced, that help hasn't come yet. So it's just so tough to see that we're in a position again, at least this one account, of feeling like this is on us again, on the community, to help ourselves out of this, because we can't rely on the government or FEMA to do so.
No, and one of the things that, you know, you brought up in sort of the sensitivity of, you know, what do we do, fully knowing that the island is losing people. And if you look at some of the stats, you know, more than about 20% or more of the island is 65 and older. Yeah, so these are people that have critical chronic diseases that, you know, you cannot expect them all of a sudden to, you know, go back to work and all those type of things. And it's always kind of like that struggle, what do we do? How do we help, you know, taking people out and bringing people in? And, you know, fortunately, sort of personal experience here at the hub, that some of the students that were here did graduate and did go back to Puerto Rico. You know, and I think there's a lot of commitment from the younger generation on trying to do things a little bit different. And I think that that's very positive in some of the things that are happening out here. But it's always a struggle to sort of find that balance between what do we do here without taking the resources away. And also, you know, the sensitivity, especially in disaster research, and this is something that, you know, we've said all along, and even with some of the other disaster researchers, in terms of, you know, when we do our work, you know, what are the ethical things that we need to follow in terms of that? We cannot simply just go into a community, interview you, do the study, and then disappear. And I think in a way, for Hurricane Maria, you know, a lot of the research that happened down there created those ties that are long lasting. We've seen it right now with this response to Hurricane Fiona as well. You know, giving resources to people that you actually trust, and that there's a relationship out here, which I have to say, you know, this community level first responding is great, but it shouldn't be at the expense of other people not doing what they're supposed to do. Right, and I think that shouldn't be the decision that communities need to take out here. I think that there has to be a balance and a responsibility, kind of like that social contract that people have between you and your government and sort of those entities that are out there to sort of help you out here.
And since this is a test, hopefully people do, all the entities involved here do what they're supposed to do this go around, right? And that they didn't lie to me when I asked them what's the response going to be this time around. And that a little bit of that trust is gained back. Because as far as the people that I've spoken to, they're like, listen, again, Kristen, the woman I spoke to of the restaurant, she said, here's the number of a man who quite literally has his own kitchen here and he's cooking hot food. This type of person you donate directly to. Because I asked her, who can we donate to, right? And she said, here's his number, try to contact him. This is the type of person that needs direct help right now. Send rice, send beans, send water, whatever. He can cook hot food so people have hot meals until we get power back on. right? So when someone feels like, okay, this is a safe entity, and it's a human being, it's a person, not a company, not an organization, not, that's tough, right? Because in our minds, it's always like, well, no, the government is a safe haven, the nonprofit is a safe haven, the, community hub is a safe haven where we can give these donations and they're gonna get to the people they need to get to, right? So.
No, absolutely, and it reminds me also that sometimes we forget about the local capacity that's on the ground as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said it publicly, and I say it again, without a strong public university system in Puerto Rico, this idea of reconstruction of the island is just fantasy. I mean, we need to have strong institutions of higher learning out here, because that's the way it goes. And, sometimes, for my fellow researchers and faculty members that have to struggle day in and day out, my hat goes out to them, because it's very tempting. And, I went through those crossroads again, and, it's something that, I think about every day, right? What am I doing here? Right? In terms of, I should be back in Puerto Rico doing certain things, but that's where reality hits, right? I think that's that balance between reality and sentiment, right? And the world is not what we think it is or what we want it to be. It is what it is, right? In terms of, and I've seen, the downfall of, most of the institutions, right? In terms of, having Secretary of Education serve time for corruption in the last 20, 30 years. How fast are you bringing? And not to say that there's no corruption here. I don't think that's the message out here in terms of that. But I think the sort of the outrage that people had, especially after the summer of 2019 was like taking away resources from education and health. Kind of like those basic kind of like needs.
Yeah.
It's not like this special fund for,
Right.
Tourism or it's education and health. And I think that's, how do we change that in terms of that? And, it concerns me, because what happened in Puerto Rico in a way is happening here, right? We cannot blame government for everything that's bad, not pay taxes,
Right.
and then expect this level of service like, hey, you need to give me the resources out here, and emergency manager here for the city of Orlando. I sympathize with that manager over here. That we need to have realistic expectations of what is it that we expect out here. Because I think what's happening in Puerto Rico is we're replacing governmental functions to basic services, replacing it to private sector, and then it's a matter of who can afford those.
Right.
And that's creating sort of a different reality for some people in Puerto Rico, ones that are living very well, and then some that are just have no access to basic things.
There has to be a balance, right?
Yeah.
So right now, Puerto Rico is feast or famine. You're in Delgado having a great time, or you're basically everywhere else is suffering, right? And so, I don't know, it just seems to me the deterioration of the middle class has only further increased in the decades versus getting better, right? Which is always a conversation about the middle class deteriorating no matter where you are, right? But it seems to be really severe in Puerto Rico. It seems like you are either just working and making that, $7.25 an hour, or you're living the life of luxury, right? And then, you pose a question about, well, how do you keep people here, right? Well, part of the answer to that question, at least by the government of Puerto Rico, was to say, well, you create really great tax incentives. And who does that benefit? Not the average Puerto Rican, right? And so what you have is mainlanders who go over and enjoy, 100% not paying capital gains on it, right? And life is great. And you can enjoy the island for what it is, and you stay in your little hub of Dorado, and you make it as anglicized as you possibly can, and you put people in a position where they don't even feel like they belong on their own island, that that certain areas of the island are not for them. And, you know, I'm not pretending to know the answers, but that can't be the answer.
No, and you bring about a situation, and let's bring back Bonnie into the conversation.
I was literally just gonna refer to that. I was
Right?
literally just gonna say that, because he highlighted that that was
Yeah,
highlighted
no,
so well in this document.
Yeah, now, outside of the second part, which, if you don't know what that means, find out. But if you know, you know. But no, I think that's a concern, right? A lot of people are saying, like, you know, I've been pushed out of my own island, you know, because, you know, the developments and all sort of things. So there's you know, there's awareness of that, you know, figures like, you know, and it shouldn't be, you know, figures like Bad Bunny making light of this, right? This shouldn't be, but we know that he's on top of the world right now. But these are kind of like serious situations out here. And I think one of the things is, you know, I always look at this that, yes, there are particularities for Puerto Rico out here. But don't feel so immune that you think this might not happen in your community. And I think this is a message that goes across out here in terms of that. And that's, I think, that when we bring the message of, you know, climate change and extreme weather events, we've seen it all over. I mean, knock on wood that it's been good so far, but we continue to experience those, right? And you know, we at a certain point, you know, we need to stop and say, like, hey, we gotta be running out of places to go to, right? In terms of, you know, a lot of the flooding that happened in Houston, a lot of people didn't have flood insurance because they weren't part of the flood zones out here. So that's my advice out here. There's some professors here at UCF that actually put together a vulnerability index that you can go out there, you can type in your address, and it tells you how resilient and vulnerable your community is. So check on those, because you never know with some of the things that are going on nowadays that, you know, you never know. It could be one storm away that just sits out here and creates that damage as well. I think we're kind of like at that point that we might entertain some questions from the crowd, and I'm hoping that we can start that conversation.
So I just wanted to recognize a few people, Dr. Natalia Toro, who is the president of La FASA, which is the Latino Association of Staff and Faculty here at UCF. We have Kavita, who represents the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and then Ala Camacho, who's representing Commissioner Maribel Cordero Guzman, who, by the way, was on the front lines as a case manager with Proyecto Casa, when we had English classes right after Hurricane Maria, and comprehensive case management services. You know, and to that end, obviously, we will be providing you all with like links and information of where you can find, you know, you never know where you should give money, but we'll definitely share resources of what's out there, but also of where like information and a safety net of services will be in Orlando, okay? So we have Hispanic Federation, Alianza, Iniciativa Acción Puertorriqueña. We have a lot of strong institutions out here that are gearing up, okay? So we'll make sure to share that with you. Thank you to Manny Soto for being here from the City of Orlando, the director of, did I give you a promotion? The manager of emergency management at the City of Orlando. And of course, we can go on and on about all the wonderful people that are here today. So before people depart, we have time for some question and answers. So does anyone?
Is there any other representative from elected officials that we have acknowledged?
We're here, we're both Julian and Sergio from State House Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith.
Yes, thank you. And we love him, and I think he's a knight, right?
Yeah.
He's a UCF knight.
Yes.
And a champion for immigration and Puerto Rico, and so thank you for being here.
Yeah, my name is Javier. I'm with the Sentinel of Orlando. Now with Fiona, don't you feel that we are like in the same place right now? And how do you feel in terms of the Puerto Rican people, like they see how the government try to put some effort to fix the island, but in their reality is not a real fix because things are not real fixed.
Yeah.
No, it's a mixed bag, right? You know, like you were saying, right? You know, there was, FEMA has more Spanish-speaking personnel.
Yeah.
There were more supplies on the island. I think in this sense, we have areas that were hit harder than others. But that will allow from other areas of the island to actually respond locally to some of the things that were going on. But the perception, right, and I say, everything Puerto Rico is very complicated in terms of, and politics get into the way as well, right? I think it has, if your team blew, then, it's sort of, you're kind of like cheering on the response, and Luma is doing a good job, and look how different. And to be fair, right, in terms of even communication, right? I've been able to communicate with people in Puerto Rico, which was not the case after Hurricane Maria. So there was sort of a big improvement that way. I've talked to some of my colleagues in Puerto Rico, and they're saying like, hey, we have supplies, we have all those sort of things. So, but that's today. I know we're talking this hit on Sunday. Today's Tuesday. It's still very early on. If history is any guide, we knew that, kind of like that 2-week, 3-week span after Hurricane Maria, that's where the desperation did actually kicked in, right? When people had kind of like their supplies for the emergency setting, neighbors were helping out neighbors, but then all of a sudden there was like, wait, we have no water, there's no electricity, the gas lines are immense, there's no ice, you got into a real tenseful situation, and that's where a lot of people decided, I'm going to get out of here because there's going to be no progress. Still early. Let's hope so that, a week from now, things are better. Let's give it 2 weeks with all the challenges that the island has right now. But then again, how do you, I would say, how do you move forward, right? And just sort of give you the, sort of what captures the sentiment and spirit of the people, and kind of like to your question. Those temporary bridges that the Army Corps of Engineers put in some places were watched away. And, that tells you, all right, 5 years, temporary fix, back to square one.
And only you just need one drop to spill the glass. Only one drop. That's my question. Is this the drop that we're waiting to spill the glass? I know the circumstances are different. I know this is not Maria, and maybe we're not going to see all the people moving to Central Florida as we saw until 2017. But people in Puerto Rico is tired. They are exhausted. They don't see things changing, and they deserve better. We deserve better.
I think it's too early to answer that question. I think I agree. I was going to say about a week from now, if we have way more power restored and resources are going out, granted, even if they're temporary, you need permanent solutions, right? But in any disaster, recovery is immediate, right? That's a process that has to happen. And the recovery part of Maria was just non-existent, right? So we can only hope that the recovery from this go-around, like we discussed earlier, this truly is a test. Is everything that you guys, quote unquote, prepared for going to come to fruition? Are the resources really there? Is the manpower really there to distribute it? And is everyone to come together and utilize the last 5 years of knowledge properly so that we don't have deaths, so that we don't have, beyond what has happened so far, so that we don't have people dying from hydration? That's not something that should happen after recovery in the United States. It just shouldn't, right? So I think I agree with you. A week, 2 weeks from now, if things are going like, oh, this is a much different scenario. People have water, people have generators, and 500,000, 1 million people restored. Now we're talking, it's the reverse where it's parts of the island are still suffering. Granted, even that is unacceptable, but when you have debris and you have mountainous areas that are going to take a second to get to, those circumstances come into play. In Maricao, for example, they went, 6 months after Hurricane Maria without power, without the entire municipality fully restored. 6 months in the dark, right? That shouldn't be this case this go around. We would hope, right? That's what we're being told, that this scenario is not going to be the same. So we only hope that that's true this time around. We have to, unfortunately, we're in a wait and see right now.
Yeah, and even, now we're in that circumstance of the loss of life. And we knew at the beginning of Hurricane Maria, they were saying there wasn't a whole, but it's not only the immediate context, right? We know prior to Hurricane Fiona, there was a crisis of doctors and nurses and services available, right? And have we seen that there was some indications that they had to move some patients from one hospital to the other because they didn't have power and they prioritized in those areas? And obviously, let's hope that that number remains. I think right now there's two are documented.
Right.
And one was with working with a power plant. So if you have family and friends, remember to practice safe conditions in generators and all sorts of things, because those could be deadly. And so, and the other one, just get swept by the current out there. But remember, I think we need to keep an eye out to make sure that, this doesn't repeat itself again. When we have people that don't have access to critical services and all those types of things. And I think that's the way we need to look at this. But you're right.
I think that's the measure. It's the only measure we have right now. Is the recovery going better than Maria? That's the only measure we have for this right now.
I have another question from
Put this together. Are we really expecting like hundreds of families to move here in the next couple of days? Because what I will remember 5 years ago with Maria, JetBlue went crazy, sending planes there and bringing people here. These people, they just came here because JetBlue opened the gates and people come.
Right.
This time, I haven't heard of JetBlue, Spirit, any airline offering to bring people from Puerto Rico here.
Right. Well, I think the circumstances immediately after the storm are different, right? So because of the way Fiona hit, what was it, La Isla, the countryside, right, of Puerto Rico, that's the major focus in terms of, reducing flooding, getting pumps out, rescues and that sort of thing. You're talking about Metro San Juan, parts of San Juan already have power and people are going about their business, right? So I think the major issue there, the people that I've spoken to are in San Juan go, we don't have power right now and obviously we need water. If those circumstances persist beyond a week, 2 weeks, that's when you have those major crowds, I think, come in. Immediately, I think people are gonna go, we have enough for a week, enough water and food to get us by. Hopefully a week from now we have power. Hopefully a week from now the more resources are coming in, that we can get more resources to sustain ourselves. If the power isn't going to be on for longer, hopefully we have a generator, all these things are, hopefully the resources are there to keep people okay in the recovery portion of, post-hurricane, post-disaster. But then we enter long-term. Like you said, it was after Maria 2-3 weeks of, oh my goodness, nothing's changed. And now we have, major deaths and, that sort of thing. So I think that comes, if it comes down to the point of this is persisting beyond emergency recovery. This is now going into daily life of we don't have water or power.
Yeah. No, I think from what I've heard right now, there's some efforts for critically ill people. Because remember, this is where, if you're bedridden and you don't have access to air conditioner, it gets extremely hot in Puerto Rico. If you don't have access to your medical supplies, I think that might be, if things don't change quickly, that's probably the population that we might need to take on in the immediate aftermath.
I don't think at the level, because, if schools are restored
Right.
and people can go back and, they can start driving and hospitals are open, also it's going to be a little bit different circumstances, but we're sort of waiting to see what's going to be, what's unfolding, and then what is going to be the ask for people out there in Puerto Rico as well.
I mean, flights were already coming from Puerto Rico yesterday, people were arriving.
Oh, yeah,
Right?
the airport is
So,
open.
the airport's
Airport
open,
is
whereas
open,
that
yeah.
was not the case, what we were discussing 5 years ago, come tomorrow, and the next day was, David Begnaud interviewing the governor outside of the airport because there was thousands of people at the airport waiting to get off the island, right? That is not quite the chaotic circumstance we're in today, and we hope it doesn't get there, right? But 2 days in, it's too early to tell what the aftermath is truly going to be. We can only hope that it's, again, positive and not negative.
Yeah, Sarah Miligoni, one of the PhD candidates here at UCF. So I do research on Puerto Rico now for almost 4 or 5 years. But what is mind blowing to me, it's how you see when you do research on emergency management capabilities, you see the ties between emergency management, which is a very operative kind of activity, and politics. You realize that several of the long-term recovery issues were also caused by the lack of representation, voting rights, and so lack of public assistance that gets to the island, etc. So I'm thinking more in the long term, so even beyond Hurricane Fiona. When it comes to trying to empower Puerto Rico in terms of the emergency management capabilities, it looks like that the more you focus on the local communities, the better it's going to be. Because apparently, as we see with example like Casa Pueblo in Ajuntas, that's a clear example of where a local and grassroots association is able to really empower the local community recovery. And that, to build on your last point, Dr. Rivera, providing, refrigerators for diabetic patients to store their insulin. And that's exactly what happened after Maria, and that's exactly what's happening now, because they're already, ready with their solar panels to kind of regenerate power. Literally was already yesterday, so 1 day after. My question is, what kind of implications you see when it comes to empowering eventually, local communities to be able to almost respond and recover from these kind of disasters by themselves when it comes to the federal government. So what could have been what could be the response? Okay, then Puerto Rico is able to do them by themselves, so we care even less, or things like that. So it's more my question is more provocative, what can be the implication then?
Well, on the FEMA front of things, I can say this. I mean, $28 billion has been allocated for Puerto Rico. That was back then, right? So that money is there, it's not going there. That is for Puerto Rico. Of course, the process of getting all the projects approved based on the FEMA requirements and then those funds coming in, that's a whole different process. That's still going, 5 years later, right? So, I don't know what the connection is between something like federal help getting into nonprofits' hands and getting to community hands, right? Because we can talk about Protechos, we can talk about Casa Pueblo, we can talk about all these homegrown grassroots efforts. It's people getting up and saying, I'm going to do something about this, right? But when you talk to those organizations like Protechos, they're like, we're 30 people who's working all across the island to still repair roofs after Hurricane Maria, and we're a nonprofit, and we work with the municipality, who works with the local government, who works with FEMA to get funds distributed from A to us, from A to Z. And that process takes a long time. How we expedite that, I gotta tell you, I have no clue.
Yeah, right.
I wish I had an answer for you, but the money is there. How we get it into the proper hands, that always seems to be a concern, right? Lord, I wish I had a better answer for that.
I think you bring, this point of the politics of disaster response and recovery. You know, reflecting back, I think Puerto Rico was in a very unfortunate situation that you had a very inexperienced governor and a very inexperienced president. Probably meeting the hardest challenge that you could ever imagine in terms of emergency management, right? And, you know, regardless of your political leanings, so all those type of things, I think that inexperience did cause a lot of, you know, hesitation in terms of the severity of the storm, all those type of things. And I think right now we're in this dangerous path that we looked at, we use political lenses to something that shouldn't be political at all, right? In terms of, oh, I'm gonna give help because it might give me some votes, right? Or some kind of like those things, and those actually impact what we do locally here. I wasn't born yesterday, right? like they say. But let's go back to COVID-19. Puerto Rico did get treated equally as other states. And we saw that local response was a very good response. And I think the story of Puerto Rico is so complicated.
I know.
Right, it's so fascinating.
There's never one answer.
But, you know, I'm admitting I was guilty. I wrote papers that said like, hey, I'm very concerned about Puerto Rico and COVID-19. Because if you look at all the risk factors, you know, in terms of, you know, obesity, asthma, all the stuff, all the population at risk, that was Puerto Rico, right? Fragile medical care system, all those type of things. But what do you know? Puerto Rico had the best response.
Yeah.
In terms of that, right? They were able to snip this in the behind and prove as an example, right? All of a sudden we were, hey, Puerto Rico is leading the nation in vaccination. You know, we'll be able to do that. So that, but I see to your point, right? When, and that brings into the issue that sometimes when you provide the resources to the local capacity that we have, it actually works. Right, and I guess sometimes, you know, and I know, you know, one of the things that I hear from nonprofits in Puerto Rico and even here is the complexity of managing federal grants. You know, you need, people don't realize that there's only few organizations that can actually take on, you know, a significantly amount of money from the federal government in terms of, you know, keeping assessment, accounting, accountability, all those type of things. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
And that's why you get the same groups getting the resources all over and over again. You know? And I think that's, you know, in terms of how to empower communities, can we train community, can we sort of start training that? And every time I go to Puerto Rico, I said, hey, what do you need? We need training to really manage federal grants.
And to that end, I think time is such a big factor in this, right? Because I think if you live in Puerto Rico, you know that it's the community that helps each other out in these situations, right? But as you went to Puerto Rico after Maria, I went 4 months after as well. And like you said, I went to Macau and I was there in Yabucoa, and it just looked like, like it just looked like it happened the day before. It was remarkable. But I sat down with Rosario at the time and we had a one-on-one interview, and I said, okay, where do you see Puerto Rico going back to pre-Maria? And he said, I would say about 5 years. So when I sit down with Pierluisi last week or a couple weeks ago, whatever it was, I asked, well, I know he's your predecessor, but I'm gonna ask you, he had a timeline of 5 years. What is your response to that? And he said, well, I don't know why you said that, because even with Katrina in Louisiana, 15 years later, FEMA was still helping people after Katrina. So I don't know why 5 years was his response. I said, fair, right? So it's, esto es un 2x3, you know, like it's so hard to come up with these answers, but if we can find a way to really empower these groups, these community group, grassroots efforts, those are where the real change comes from, and that's where you can rebuild roofs and get hot food into mouths and really make efforts with build solar panels. I think renewable energy has to be Puerto Rico's #1 priority. It has to be. I think the fact, I mean, what was it? a part of my story, I spoke to a guy who's in the energy industry for decades, and he goes, you know, they're running right now because of the price of natural gas, they're running so much, depending on so much on diesel, on bunker oil, a derivative of diesel. He goes, 1% of the world uses oil, uses diesel. 1%. Like, the infrastructure itself was set up not in the best formula, but it's what they have, so they gotta deal with it, right? On top of that, you go, well, how, with the price of natural gas always being volatile, but especially right now, you have to go, we have to make renewable energy the #1 priority. We need solar panels like yesterday. That should be the way the island is running. Not predominantly on diesel, which is volatile in pricing, which is coming out to the customer, #1, but #2 is unreliable and it's frankly obsolete. You know, like it's just, yeah.
Well, and that's where we get into the complications of Puerto Rico, right?
Right.
Because I'm pretty sure somebody is benefiting from this. And bringing in a lot of money. And, you know, when you know, I think it's a more complicated, you know, you have to follow the money to see.
Right.
And it's not only companies in Puerto Rico, it could be,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
companies here, and it could be all those type of things, so that's the complication.
So there was one more question, I think somebody ever.
Oh, yes.
So speaking on the, you know, focusing on the local nonprofit organizations and all that, I know we're just about 2 days after the hurricane actually hit, and we're looking at assessing damage. So our office actually sat in a call with different organizations here in Central Florida, and we have like the people to support, but a lot of people are holding back and waiting for the assessment because they don't want to get an excess of supplies that might be, you know, what Puerto Ricans don't need.
Right.
So what is the best way to communicate and stay up to date about what Puerto Rico needs and what the people need that we can support at their local levels, and just send supplies, resources, or even if preparing for them to come
Right.
here? What's the best way to keep communication as time goes on?
I would say if you have family and friends on the island, contact them directly. Hey, what are you seeing in your community right now? What's happening? I know in Santurce right now, they need water and they need food. Because I've been keeping tabs on that area. And then it has to be homegrown. There's no way that we can contact, you know, a nonprofit over there and they're scrambling and trying to just keep people alive, right? But even then, they're doing that in their area. I think the only way to do it is truly contacting those on the island and having them contact others as much as they can. That's the only thing I can think of right now to say, we need to get the food in the right hands, the water in the right hands of generators to those who desperately need them because you need it for your medication, right? That's the only thing I would be able to say, is you have to really do a grassroots kind of before the assessments come in, right? If you're trying to do something ahora, that's the only way to get it done, I would say.
Yeah, no, and I think there's different levels, right, in terms of what you can do from person to person, organization to organization, government to government, right? And I think you know, because obviously we're not going to ask, you know, a nonprofit to build a bridge
Right.
overnight, or do a building, or do all those type of things. I think that there's different levels out here. But I could tell you, you know, we're monitoring the situation out here, and we have partners on the ground in Puerto Rico, so as soon as they say, we need this, like Protecho
Right.
is looking for donations because they're working with a specific family right now.
Right.
So that's, you know, basically they need the money out here, you know, tell your constituents like, hey, you're interested in this, there's an organization that does this. There's an organization that does this and that, but I'm concerned that right now people are jumping the gun, and I've seen so many people collecting money already, and I don't know, what are you using that money for? Because, you know, so, and still there's the cloud of Hurricane Maria, right? That they were saying like, hey, we don't want to go through this situation again, where we provided a lot of resources that ended up, you know, just being not distributed and just lost. Yeah, go ahead.
From what I heard,
Yeah.
and that's stuff now, Hispanic Federation have an office here in Orlando. Now, from what I heard yesterday, Hispanic Federation in New York, which is the main one, they already are sending money and supplies to Hispanic Federation, the one in Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, yeah.
Okay, and they are coordinating now. Hispanic Federation in San Juan, they have a list of his non-profit organizations throughout the island, because they do a lot of, they do support, like in agriculture, housing,
Yes.
Hispanic Federation. So right now, and as you saw on Facebook, Hispanic Federation here is having a live Facebook talking to the community here. What are they gonna do here in conjunction with Hispanic Federation in New York to support the one in Puerto Rico? So that's one route that, you know, they can also look and see how can they help. Now, there's an organization in Tampa called Boricuas de Corazon. Boricuas de Corazon, when Maria happened, they went to Puerto Rico, like a group of 50, and they went on their own. And they brought like supplies and they sent things and they went to the island. But now this time, they went to the south of the island. See, reading in Twitter and in Facebook lately, since this happened, that why if they are concentrating in San Juan and San Juan.
Right.
I mean, there is, Puerto Rico is not San Juan. Puerto Rico is the island. And we all know that the south of the island has been suffering from disasters like after Maria. Earthquakes. I mean, they get everything. I don't know why. I'm from Yauco, and I'm like, really? What's happening? I mean, we didn't pray enough. We're not behaving, that everything is coming down to the south. And right now, where the eye went through?
Yeah, it was the south of that.
The south.
No,
Like
you make-
Guayanilla,
I mean,
Huánica, Yauco, like, you know, Cabo Rojo, they all.
No, there's great organizations out there doing the work, right? And I think it's sort of how do we sort of orchestrate a way that we're not replicating efforts that already people are doing and have, you know, and again, you know, this gets into politics too,
So
right?
that's the way
There's some places where perhaps you don't believe in Hispanic Federation, you know, donate to the Red Cross, or sort of their local entities. So, you know, we have to strike that balance also, in terms of like, you have yeah.
So I lived in Puerto Rico 15 years. I went to school on an Army base, Fort Buchanan. My husband and I graduated from the University of Puerto Rico. It's home for me, even though I'm 53 and I've lived in the United States longer. Born in New York, lived in California, lived in Vermont, Connecticut, and now Florida. 24 years, the longest I've lived. And I noticed something really big. When I was in high school, I went to a program called Presidential Classroom for Young Americans. We went to Washington, D.C. All of the other states, they got to meet their senators, their representatives. Because I was from Puerto Rico, our group got to meet our commissioner, resident commissioner, and that time was Jaime Fuse. And it was very interesting, and we were able to interview a 5-star general and ask the question I asked personally, what is the significance of Puerto Rico to the United States? And he mentioned, as the 5-star general, the location of Puerto Rico between North and South America, the Caribbean, bases. Back then we had multiple bases in Ceiba, Vieques, Aguadilla. Now I think we pretty much have Fort Buchanan in San Juan. I lived in San Juan. I went through Hurricane Hugo in the 80s, and we had no power, no water for a very long time. And I just remember thinking, okay, so if we're so important, and we have a resident commissioner, why does our resident commissioner only have a voice, not a vote? Because I know many of the things that happen in Puerto Rico we would never tolerate in the mainland United States of America, ever. And my husband's a physician, I'm a physical therapist, we work in healthcare in Puerto Rico, we work here in healthcare. And we see the difference in the medical services, the hospital system, as patients, as providers. And I just think, I know this probably is not something you can answer, we've had plebiscitos back and forth, a statement, Commonwealth, what do we do with our country? But it seems like when you have a voice and a vote, probably things will get done in a more efficient way. So I know that that's the way it is. I don't know what we can do about it. But I'm just thinking, how in the world can we have more than just a voice in Washington so that...
Yeah, I know, you bring the $1 million question, right? I think the million is outdated, right? You have to do like the $1 trillion question. I mean, yes, you know, there might be some level of you know, accountability in terms of that. But just think, you know, what happened in Jackson, Mississippi, the state of the United States.
Right. Yeah. They don't
No
have
water.
water. Yeah.
No water.
Michigan.
So,
no water.
yeah, Michigan, and what those communities have in common? I'm not gonna say it out loud, but you can figure it out.
Yeah.
So I would say, what is it, that really could provide that sort of accountability? And if it's that simple, if it were that simple, right? And again, I go back to who's benefiting from the current status quo.
Well, someone is, not with the last one.
Exactly, so it's not necessarily, so I think that's the honest conversation that we need to have, right? In terms of, if somebody's benefiting mildly, and I'm not saying only people in Puerto Rico, I'm saying people here as well. In terms of that, what is the discussion to turn that around, that, hey, you can keep your profit margin,
Right.
but you can provide a little bit more to the people, right, in terms of that. So I'm always, a little bit hesitant to say, like, we have this magic pill in terms of that. But even, kind of like bringing politics and all sorts of things. I think even the response last time around after Hurricane Maria was during midterms as well. We had a very close race for governor, and eventually we had a very close race for the Senate. And at that time around, there was sort of the Puerto Rican voice and vote here was important. We'll see if this time around is the same in terms of, are we going to provide some type of help that, might help with the political type of things, because, talk about timing is sort of perfect timing out here if you have a close race right now. But we should see. And politics have become so polarized out here that.
Well, it's the national sport of Puerto Rico.
No, for sure. I asked Pierluisi about that when I spoke to him, and I said, you're a statehooder, do you think it's a reality for Puerto Rico to ever become a state? And he said, we have a motion right now and blah, 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 whatever committee, and all that, right? And he said, for me, this is gonna be a fight until my last breath. Puerto Rico, I can see us being a state, within my lifetime. And for me personally, I just think as long as Congress and lawmakers see Puerto Rico just as a democratic entity, it'll probably never become a state, in my opinion. Pierluisi was like, we have to get the word out because I speak to I speak to congressmen and other fellow blah, 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 but they have to realize we're all not just liberal or, I'm a moderate and there's conservatives and blah, blah, blah. But the perspective, the perception of Puerto Rico is that it's blue, 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 blue. And why would you give 3 million more people the right to vote for a Democrat in the office if you're a Republican lawmaker, right? I think that's the nasty element. I think that's what it comes down to. Or else,
It's sad, because
it is terrible. It's terrible.
4 million
It's
people
awful.
on an
No.
island that's a commonwealth of the United States of America.
Well, and even, bringing the awareness, right? Because, you live in Puerto Rico,
yeah.
and we tend to discuss, at least my perception when I was in Puerto Rico, it seems that that's the only thing that Congress talks about. Puerto Rico, the status, and all sort of stuff. You come here and realize that
No one knows that.
nobody knows about
Yeah.
Puerto Rico, right? And I think that's sort of, the continuous challenge out here in terms of not going through the assumptions that everybody cares or knows what Puerto Rico is and the relationship with Puerto Rico, even including here. I've stopped assuming
Yeah.
that people know anything about Puerto Rico.
And that's the thing, it's on us too. How many times every person I know says, bueno, yo no voy para Estados Unidos, yo no voy. And I'm going, you mean you're not gonna go to the mainland? Because you're in the United States, right? So that's on us too to fix that. Because what does that do to others? That tells others, oh, well, they must not be a part of the United States. So we have to fix that within us. Granted, the issues of colonization, and we can get into all that, great. But the reality is we are a part of the United States. So we have to correct that language within ourselves. When I sat down with Rosario, I asked him, he said the only positive thing that came out of Maria was because that storm was of such strength, it made not the national stage, the global stage, right? And so he said, the only positive thing that came out of that storm was that our data showed about 20% of those in the mainland knew that Puerto Rico was a part of the United States prior to Maria. After Maria, that number shot up to 80%. And even then, 80% of 350 million, large number, not enough. Still people who are confused, especially the way it's taught in school, about what our status is and are we or not a part of the United States. Yes, we're part of the United States. Yes, we benefit with, you know, Social Security programs and everything else an American gets, but no, we cannot vote for president. But also, if we come over here 30 days later, we can. But also, Barack Obama himself came to Puerto Rico, declared his residency, and wouldn't be able to vote for president, and he was the president. All that gets very confusing. So, it's, I don't know.
I wanted to share, I was very proud to speak here. I was in New York for the Mets game. Major League Baseball, September 15th is Roberto Clemente Day. So my husband and I and my son, we just went to New York, and my dad, we went to the game. I was so proud of all the shirts, all the jerseys, Clemente, the flags. They had a whole video tribute to Roberto Clemente. And then on Friday, his son was there, his grandson was there. Was actually sang the national anthems, got confused, but sang them anyway. And it was a beautiful thing. I didn't hear Berlucci was there. There was some protesters protesting Luma. Apparently they were escorted out. I never saw them escorted out. I was just excited to be in a stadium full of these people from everywhere, learning all about our national hero, Roberto Clemente, on Roberto Clemente Day, with our jerseys. It was just exciting. Then the next day we go to Cooperstown, New York, to the National Baseball Hall of Fame. And Roberto Clemente is everywhere. The three statues at the entrance, Roberto Clemente, Hank Aaron, and Lou Gehrig. It's like our Babe Ruth, I remember. But it was so exciting. And then we go see his posters, and my husband was like, this is amazing. We're getting the word out for baseball. That Puerto Rico is an island in the Caribbean. It's part of the United States. We're very important. We're very significant. It's National Hispanic Heritage Month, so they had a whole thing on Hispanic Heritage Month at the Mets game. Pirates were playing at New York. They lost, and the Mets won, so the whole stadium was on fire because they were so happy that the Mets won.
Yeah, I think the contribution. And I'm assuming you're a Mets fan?
We were just Clemente jerseys.
Okay.
We're not really any fans. My husband's used to the Astros because of
the Mets glitch.
Chavo Correa, those were the
Right?
twins. But it was just a beautiful thing to see how the Puerto Rican culture, they had salsa music playing, they had Mark Anthony playing, and there were people in front of us, they were Italian, but they were talking to us about Puerto Rico and how we were there for the Mets or for the Pirates. We said we were here for Clemente, and I was like, okay, that's good. He knew all about Roberto Clemente. He's Italian, Sam McDonald's is his bakery, the Bronx. So it was a beautiful thing to see how Puerto Rico was so represented at this game.
Well, that's the one thing, is that not everything is all bad, right? I think the word has gotten out. I think, for example, even celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. Who can remember beyond a few years ago celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month? And it's been around for decades. This is something that's been around for, I want to say, 3 decades. But it was just something that was declared and never done anything about. But now, we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. It's something that people are conscious of, right? So, it takes time, but we can get there, like anything else. And, you know, just like here in Central Florida, the Puerto Rican population Puerto Rican culture is omnipresent in New York. And so it takes time to get to the point where we can be in a state and be celebrating Roberto Clemente, right? It took decades to get there.
Yeah, only last year was declared Roberto Clemente.
Right,
It's the second year they do this.
So it's one of those things where we all have to be really patient.
And so the highlight of the game was looking on the top. Tampa Bay had an all-Latino lineup of 9 players. They beat the Blue Jays 11-0. We thought it was the first time in MLB history that it's an all-Latino lineup.
Yeah.
And they smashed the other team.
Yeah, no, and so you know, September 15 was Roberto Clemente Day throughout the league.
Yes,
so all the teams celebrating, not just the Mets, but all the teams out there. But that's great to end on a very positive note. We still have some coffee and pastry if you want to hang around for a little bit. Thank you so much for your support. I do have another event this afternoon if you want to stop by at the Chickasaw Trail Library at 5 p.m. 5 p.m. And it's a collaboration with the Department of Modern Languages and the Latin American Studies program, and we're I'm moderating, I'm doing your gig, with a group of artists that are remembering Hurricane Maria here, so you're invited to do that. And we have another event here on the 23rd. Karen? What time is the event on the 23rd?
Yes, so we have some flyers here. I will have to double check, but it is at 1:30 to 3, and it is about Puerto Rico and intersectionality. So again, the flyers are here. If you'd like to attend, please feel free to grab one.
And that's from a School of Social Work, so you can see that, it's not only us, but, collaborations throughout campus. So make sure to follow us on our social media pages, and thank you so much for coming here today. And thank you.
I just want to add before we thank Kristen, so also if you go into the UCF events calendar and you use hashtag HHN22, you'll find all of the Hispanic Heritage events. So like tomorrow, there's another event happening as well. So just wanted to make sure to point that out. I know Dr. Rivera is about to thank Kristen. I just want to make sure we give you your gift.
Appreciate that. Very
Thank you
quick
so
review.
much.
Thank
All the work that you did to highlight what's happening on our island, I've seen a lot on IG, how people, we were, major networks were really featuring like what was happening in England with Queen Elizabeth,
Yes.
right? And not what's happening in Puerto Rico. And a lot of folks don't realize that standing water is very damaging. I used to work in a small village that suffered from flooding, and it really is detrimental. So just because it wasn't a Category 5 hurricane, like we will continue to see the ramifications of this, unfortunately. So, but anyway, thank you, and I'm sorry, I want to turn it over to Dr. Rivera to close us out.
If people want to catch your,
Just
Where
go
did- where did you
to WFTV.com, WFTV.com, and it should be in the weather section. But if you Google Hurricane Maria WFTV, it'll come up. It's called Hurricane Maria Power and Perseverance. But yeah, we spoke to Wayne Stensby, the CEO and President of Luma. We spoke to Josue Colon, the executive director of PREPA. We spoke to the governor. We spoke to local residents about their experiences. So it's work I'm very proud of. And I think the most gratifying thing was I watched it with my family, and to hear their responses to what was happening. What? That much? How? Huh? Like hearing those responses of people legitimately not knowing what's actually happening on the island. That was the most gratifying. Be like, oh, okay, I'm educating people. People are learning things. This is valuable, so that was good.
so thank you everyone.
Thank you.